You might wonder why I'm always changing the colors of the background pages on the Psalms that I depict in these reflections, and also the colors of the texts. I know it's a little hokey, but it goes along with my uh, notion, my suggestion that the Psalms depict a kind of mosaic of the Christ to come. This idea is not just my own. I do take it from others that I have read, and particularly a professor that I had in one of my graduate courses, John Sailhammer. And after so many years after having graduated from that program, I've finally come to realize how much truth, how much insight that he had in trying to share that particular observation about the Psalms. Be that as it may, another reason that I depict these Psalms in various colors is to heighten the beauty of them, to give us a sense of how uh, artistic they are in terms of the expression of praise, confession, thanksgiving, instruction, whether that be in any direction directly or even in personal pondering that isn't necessarily meant to go out in a large scale to the people, but simply brings us into the mind of the psalm writer. You can see in this psalm two postures of worship that the writer uh, offers in this reflection. You can see that Psalm 95 is anonymous. We do not know who the particular author is, but in the flow of the Psalms, it appears to bring us to the reality that there is an attitude that we need to come, and that the writer was suggesting needs to be practiced in worship before God in terms of all the reflections and instructions that the writers have been giving us about uh, judgment, about God's uh, wrath to come, about his mercy and his grace, about the separation of the righteous and the wicked. The psalm writer takes us into his mind in terms of realizing that he needs to prepare himself and to present himself before God with a certain perspective. And one of those perspectives you can see here in the first stanza, where he invites the readers to come, to sing joy fully, to sing joyfully to the Lord, to shout aloud. There's a sense of real celebration here. Uh, if you want to bring it to the modern day, a sense of partying, so to speak. Let us come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with great music and song. What a celebratory mood. And yet, as we look down through the psalm, you can also see the reason that the psalm writer gives us for that because of who God is and his greatness. And then as we move down towards the second half of the psalm, here is the other posture. That is a posture of bowing down in worship, that is reverence. And so not only is the perspective of singing joyfully and celebrating before the Lord very important, as writer says, but if it's done, and it should be done in an attitude of complete reverence to the Lord. That goes along with the final stanza, because in the final stanza, you can see that the writer warns the people that according to a situation that happened in Israel's history, they need to be careful that they do not harden their hearts, they do not become stubborn and stiff-necked as they worship and not listen to what God uh, instructs and tells them and wants them to follow through in obedience. The situation referred to is recorded in Exodus chapter 17, and you can read the larger context than what I've provided here. But in verses 5 through 7, we are told that the Lord directed Moses to take the elders with him and that Moses should stand there before the rock. And so Moses did this, and he called the place Massah and Meribah because the Israelites quarreled and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" So in that situation, the Israelites were doubting and not exercising faith in the God who said he would provide for them and take care of them. The writer of Hebrews refers to this passage as he instructs his readers how they can know that they have come to Christ, how they can be assured based on Christ's finished work in behalf of them. And he tells them, as you can see here in the couple of verses that I have depicted. And again, I encourage you to go to the entire chapter 3 and the whole book of Hebrews to get the sense of what the writer is driving at. But he tells them and warns them that they need to be sure to obey God and follow through with Him in faith, because if they do not, then it does show that in the long run that their faith, which they would claim to be faith, is not really faith at all, but a phony faith. Today, if you hear His voice, the writer of Hebrews says, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. And so in Psalm 95, there is a challenge in the midst of all the instruction that we have been receiving, that uh, we are invited to worship the Lord and to sing joyfully for all that He has done and for His intervention in our behalf. And yet, we also need to keep an attitude of complete reverence while making sure that we do not just celebrate and revere in the sense of ritual, but that we submit and surrender and obey.